Hey there.
Morning.
How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I am just ducky. How are you?
I am fine.
So they think they found the pipe problem yesterday.
Was it where you thought?
Sort of. They
Okay.
went up the drain through the neighbor's property, between the two neighbors' properties toward my house.
Okay.
They found a Y,
Right.
and there's a blockage there. And so water is flowing, but not flowing well. So that's the good news. The bad news is that it's not on my property. It's actually on our neighbor's property on the corner, which means that they need to get permission to, whoops, where did you go, Betsy?
I'm here.
There you go. So they need to get permission from the owners of that house to dig over there.
Ridiculous. That has to be allowed. You would think.
Well, I think what Mike is going to do, Mike being the pipe guy, I think what he's going to do is call the village first, because this actually occurs, it connects into the village pipe this Y. And so he's going to call them and see if they are now willing to own this problem and or contact our neighbors to get permission to dig. But I did suggest to Bill that he should maybe talk to them too. I mean, they're very nice people. I see them when I'm out walking Lily. They're very nice. I think he should just ask them.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But in any case, they don't have to dig another crater on my property, which is progress of sorts.
Yes, but you also don't want a lake on your property while you're showing.
No, right? And there isn't really a lake on my property.
Oh, good. Oh,
no,
so you can just fill in and reseed now and have
I think so. Yeah, they're supposed to come, that ridge, that 30-foot ridge they left where they dug, they're supposed to come, put that back first. Okay. My landscaping guy was here today. Hi. My landscaping guy was here today and said, are they going to put that dirt back?
Well,
I hope so.
Right? Okay.
So.
All right. I'm going to excuse myself for 1 second and go get a beverage.
Okie dokie.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. Everybody still home?
We are.
Yes.
Yeah. Our building is not supposed to open back up until September. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, Lisa, I'm sorry, I don't recall where all of you are from. Can you just tell me, Lisa, you're from where?
I'm from Literacy Solutions from Westchester.
Okay.
Yes.
Westchester, yes, I know Pat very well.
Yes.
Good friend of mine.
Okay.
And?
Literacy Solutions as well.
Oh, okay. Is this a test? Did she ask you to go back and report on whether I knew what I was talking about?
No.
Nope.
Hi,
and
Teresa.
I'm also with Literacy Westchester.
Yeah, I recognize you.
Hi, yes.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Sandy from Essex, Franklin County.
Oh, good. Hi, Sandy. How you doing?
Good, good. How about you?
We're hanging in there.
Oh, I know. This is a tough time of year anyway with our students, and this just makes it that much harder.
Yeah, are you, do you have tutors working with your students, or are you doing classrooms, or what?
I'm doing remote mail-ins,
Mhm.
packets, and texting when if they accept my texting, and phone calls.
Mhm.
And phone calls. Mainly 2-week turnaround packets that they work on, and then we talk in the middle of the week of any problems they have or whatever.
Mhm. Good. Hi, Jenny. Where are you from? You're muted. You have to unmute. Can you unmute your mic? There you go.
Yes, I'm in Yonkers, New York.
Oh, good. Hi.
I work out of the library here in Yonkers.
Yeah.
Now we're doing Zoom classes. The tutors are doing Zoom. Some of them are sending packets also with their students.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly, hi. Where are you from?
Hi, I'm from Literacy Nassau. I apologize if you hear my 4-year-old or 1-year-old in the background.
It's okay. I apologize if you hear my dog. She likes to announce when people are in the circle I live on. So
Oh,
she's napping right now, but yesterday I was on meetings all day and she was very vocal all day. It was driving me
Oh, no.
crazy. Yeah, it was bad. I could mute myself yesterday, but today I'm talking. So we'll
Yeah.
help for cooperation.
From children and dogs.
From children and dogs, exactly.
So our program is doing all online learning. We have 12 classes going on with
Great.
about 6 to 9 students in each class, ranging in level from beginner to advanced.
That's great.
Mhm.
I know Karen very well. And Teresa and Amy, we see your names, but no video of you. So if that's, oh, there's Teresa, good. Amy, I don't know if you want to turn your video on so we can see you. And I hope I pronounced this correctly. Griselda, is that right? Great. Can you unmute for a minute and tell us where you're from?
Hi, my name is Griselda Serrano. I work for Literacy Solutions, New York. I'm the case manager.
Oh, good. Good. Wow, we have a strong showing from Literacy Solutions this morning. Now I really am feeling like Pat is testing to see if I know what I'm talking about.
And
we
I
have
think
more
maybe
coming in.
more to come.
And Laura, hi.
Hi.
Where are you from? Hi.
I also work for Literacy Solutions New York.
Okay.
I'm Laura Dowdy.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I think we'll give it a couple more minutes. It's not quite 10 yet, and then we'll get started. And I think Kathy Houghton is planning to be on.
She's here.
Oh, she is.
I'm here.
Hi.
I'll mute myself again. Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We only invited Literacy Solutions, so
I see that. I see that. You know, now that
private showing just for
Yeah.
Literacy.
Now that Pat is on the board, you know,
Yeah, he's got to step up.
Yeah, right? More to the point, she's making me step up. Well, Kathy is very familiar with my dog Lily Bean barking in the background. On Literacy New York board meetings, she gets her own vote.
Mm-hmm. She does. She raises her little paw.
She raises her paw, and then she usually votes consistently with what Kathy and I tell her to do.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very good votes. Yeah. It's good to see so many people on.
Yeah.
Right.
Looks like everybody's got sunshine today. We have a nice sunny day here.
Yeah, us too. Us too in the North Country.
Yes, we are too. Yes,
Good.
we do too.
Oh,
Hi.
Finally.
hi. Just wondering if it's working.
Yeah, we're seeing people popping up all over the place here.
Sometimes you have to scroll over. Hi. Thank you.
This is great. This must be a hot topic for you all. Morning.
Morning. Morning. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, so Kathy, do you want me to get started, or do you want to give it another minute?
It's only 10:01. I'd give it another minute. I did want to mention when you're ready to go, the new module. So for I2O, that's connected to this. So once everybody's here, we'll do a quick welcome and an announcement.
Okay. I see a baby.
We love babies.
Yeah. What a cutie. How old is she or he, and how old?
He's 14 months.
Aw.
And what's his name?
This is Patrick. Say
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
So cute.
Hey, yeah.
What a smile.
Hi, everybody.
Where do you live? What county do you live in?
I live in Nassau County. I live in a town called Floral Park.
In which county? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Nassau County in Long Island.
Oh, okay, because if you had been in Clinton, Essex, Franklin, or Hamilton, I would have suggested that we sign him up for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library.
Oh, yeah. We're missing out on all the good stuff.
Whoops. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Somehow we are viewing Julie's screen.
Yeah. I don't know. It went from full screen to.
Yeah. Julie, you need to stop sharing your screen.
Right?
Which you should have the option to do probably at the bottom.
Marcia, this is Betsy, and as host, you have the ability to not let anyone share their screen except for yourself. That would be, where would that be?
Oh, it says you are stop sharing. I see it.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I did that without calling on anybody under 30. I'm really proud of that.
Work. Yay,
Very
Julie,
good.
a victory.
It's a brave new world, right?
Mom, no one says that.
And you can mute anyone you want at any time.
It's looking like you're hitting kind of a steady. Are you seeing more folks coming in, or?
We're holding at 36 right now. I think we're probably, we could probably get going.
Okay. Good. I just want to say thank you to LiteracyCNY for putting this together and for offering to share it with the rest of us. They had emailed me, told me that it was something that they were doing with their students, and I thought, wow, this would be really helpful for everybody. We'll all get the PowerPoint at the end too, so that we can personalize it to our own places, which makes a lot of sense. I also want to announce the newest module on the online tutor training is a citizenship coaching module. And it's all done except for the videos. We were about to come down and do the videos down at Literacy Solutions in March, but then everything closed down. So we really think the videos are very important. So we're going as soon as we can to get the videos in there and get them on, but it's a new module that will be available to all of you and all of your tutors and case managers, and it really is tied to the USCIS standards and has a lot of really good resources. So at that point, I'll turn it over to Marcia from LiteracyCNY.
Great, thank you. There are a lot of us on, but I still want you to feel comfortable to stop me at any time if you have a question. So Betsy is going to be sort of watching all of you while you are watching the screen, and will let me know if there's a question. You can also feel free to put any questions you have or comments in the chat function, and she'll be keeping an eye on that as well as we go along.
So I can't actually see everybody all at once because I'm only able to see 25 at a time, and there's 38 on right now.
Okay.
So how about if you have a question, put it in chat and I will let Marcia know, and that way everybody can mute themselves unless they want to speak up.
Okay, that's better. That's why I have Betsy, right? So I think you all know I'm Marcia Tatum, the Executive Director of LiteracyCNY, and Betsy Lang is our Operations Manager. And the genesis of this presentation is that in anticipation of having to provide formalized case management services beginning on July 1, assuming the AIL awards are ever contracted and we are doing anything as of July 1. And so Betsy got us organized to begin providing case management services now during the shutdown, following the rules that we will have to comply with after July 1. So we're doing two things. We've alerted our teachers, and I should back up and say that we are providing 4 classes via Zoom and have been since March 16th. They are all English language learners. One of the classes is composed of ELLs who are transitioning to TABE testing in preparation for moving on to high school equivalency with other programs. Probably mostly the Syracuse Educational Opportunity Center where we are located. And so we have alerted our teachers to, if any student has a need for some kind of human service assistance during this period, they are emailing Betsy and she is connecting them to other human services that are available in our community. But we are also offering a series of presentations on topics of interest to the students, timely topics. So we've had a Financial Empowerment Center come on and give a presentation, and we've had Vera House, which is our local domestic violence prevention program. And the teachers are soliciting ideas for these presentations from the students. So everything we've done has been in response to a request. And these attendance at these presentations is totally voluntary. So any of our students from any of those 4 classes can join the presentations we've been offering. We had a nice turnout for this one. It was directly in response to questions that started to arise when the protests began, the week following the protests. And the students were asking their teachers for explanations about what was happening, what does the government have the power to do, what is the difference between the local government, the county government, the state government, the federal government that you hear all about, and they were confused about who has what authority. And then, as you'll see in the presentation, all of that, of course, is compounded by the fact that political speech is protected in the United States. So politicians can say things publicly that may not in fact be true, or may not in fact be the law. And so the students were becoming confused about things, and you'll see we address some specific questions around that as we go along. So we are providing, as I said, 4 classes via Zoom instruction. We just got a local grant to continue doing that for July and August. We normally don't have classes in July and August, but we got an emergency community grant to be able to continue. And at this point, we believe our building will open back up in September. And then pursuant to the latest set of rules from State Ed, we will start doing intake and testing again in person and resume in-person instruction when we can. We also do have a volunteer one-to-one program, but we found that despite, I believe the grand total is 18 different communications over the course of the last 3 months, by phone, by email, by text, you name it, we only have 8 active tutors right at the moment. The rest, just for a variety of reasons, have not resumed tutoring virtually. So, and we've offered training, we've offered Zoom training, we've offered you name it, but they just are really reluctant. So that's a little bit about our program. Again, this is like Government 101. I do have a degree in public administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University, and Betsy challenged me to prove that I learned something while I was up there by putting this presentation together. So that's my credential for doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and give me just a moment to pull, the slides are up, but I want to go into slide mode. And again, if you have a question, please put it in that chat box. So here we go.
And I'd like to remind everybody to put yourself on mute unless you have a question. We are hearing a little background noise.
Okay. I am going to move you off to the side so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. So I've already done the introduction. So one of the things that we wanted to address in our presentation is many of our English language learners here in Syracuse are refugees from around the world. Syracuse is a refugee resettlement center as well as a sanctuary city. So we wanted to start with the very basics of what is a democracy, because many of our students did not originate in democracies, right? So the point that I really wanted to emphasize was that ordinary people hold political power in the United States and rule the country through their elected representatives. We choose our leaders by voting, and this last point is a key point because it comes up frequently in the presentation. People in the United States have the right to express their political opinions. And so we will talk again a little bit about the difference between political speech and the law. So I love this photo of the Constitution. So I included it, and we talked a little bit about the U.S. Constitution being the document that governs our rights in the United States. And we also talked about the Bill of Rights. And of course, the Bill of Rights you hear about in the news frequently because the right to carry arms is, of course, in the Bill of Rights or the amendments, the original amendments to the Constitution. It is the Constitution that protects free speech in the United States. And it is the Constitution that forms the basis of all of our laws, all of our legal structure.
Marcia, before you go on, we have a question comment, and that is, what about the Electoral College?
Okay. The students didn't really ask about that. We certainly could have gotten into it if they had. And I think that you all understand how that works, but in case you don't, the Electoral College is a way of allocating votes. So the people vote, but then each state has a number of votes through the Electoral College, and it is in fact the Electoral College that elects the President of the United States, not the people. And I think actually I did address that in a slide later on. I'm just not remembering, but that would be the answer I would give them. But notwithstanding that, there are levels of government where the people elect their representatives at various levels of government. So even though the president is elected by the Electoral College, the vote really does matter. The head count matters. So government in the US, again, it can be local, where you live. your village, your town, your city, all of those may have elected officials governing. Your county, which is a group of those villages, towns, and cities near each other. And I obviously listed Syracuse, Onondaga County, and so forth, but if you decide to use the PowerPoint presentation, you can just feel free to change those things so that it reflects your own community. A state, which is a group of counties near each other, which has its own capital, in our case, Albany. And then national or federal government, which is the whole United States of America, all 50 of them, the capital of which is Washington, D.C. Now, as I'm saying this, I know you know this, but I'm giving you the presentation as if I was giving it to the students because they didn't necessarily know this. And in fact, we have found that our adult basic ed students don't necessarily understand these levels of government. So it isn't just the ELLs, it can be the ABE students. I tutor a student myself, and she gets very confused about which level of government is in play when we talk about current issues. So bear with me, I'm not intentionally insulting your intelligence. I just want to kind of give it to you the way I gave it to them. So what are some examples of local laws? Rent laws, if you rent your house or your apartment, the laws that govern that contract are local. Zoning, which means what a piece of property can be used for. So some pieces of property can only be homes and others can only be commercial. Public safety, meaning the police. But again, there are layers of police in the United States, so there are different levels of police. We'll talk about that a bit as we go through. And who's in charge locally? This is our mayor in Syracuse, and he works with the city council, which are elected representatives of the city. And our Onondaga County executive, Ryan McMahon, who works with a county legislature, which is also elected. And for those of you who don't know, that's Ben Walsh on your right and Ryan McMahon on your left. And we've heard a lot from both of them during the COVID pandemic. They do pretty much daily briefings. So a question came up, who's in charge of the schools? And this is also pretty confusing in the United States because the school districts do not necessarily conform to town or city boundaries or counties. So there are more than 13,500 local school districts across the United States. And because you are not students, but you are teachers, I will just briefly remind you that how that came to be was as the United States was settled from east to west, people in the colonies and the settlements wanted control over their own schools as schools began to pop up. And we have never changed that. So we have never federalized the government. The decisions are still in the hands of the local school districts. And each school district has a school board, again, made up of people who are elected to that board from the local community. Typically, each district has a paid superintendent who manages the schools. Each school typically has a principal who is like the person in charge of the school. So I told the students, so like I'm in charge of our literacy school, that's the principal, and your student's school have principals. And most schools have a volunteer parent group of some kind that you can probably join if you're interested in helping that principal and those teachers to provide instruction. So the federal and state governments make laws that school districts have to follow. The federal government contributes about 8 to 10% of local school budgets. The New York State government spends about $37 billion a year on school districts, but the amount will vary from school district to school district depending on a variety of things. So where we can say with certainty that your local school gets about 8 to 10% of its budget from the federal government, it varies a great deal at the state level, what the percentage is. So even though the federal government and the state government pays for part of the budget and makes some laws, it is the local school district that makes decisions about what to teach your children and how to teach it. So some examples of state laws, and this is our New York State Governor, Andrew Cuomo, who of course is very famous at the moment, but not necessarily to your students, because we interestingly discovered during the shutdown that a lot of our students in fact don't own televisions and don't have necessarily computer equipment. So they aren't necessarily seeing Andrew Cuomo's briefings every day or, you know, the news every night. So they may or may not recognize this face. But some examples of state laws are, again, crime. There are state police. Family and divorce laws are made at the state level. So if you want to become divorced in New York State, it is different laws than you would have to comply with if you lived somewhere else, like say Delaware. Very different laws around family and divorce issues. Welfare and Medicaid rules are made at the state level. Estates, meaning what happens to your property when you die, that is state law. Real estate, so if you want to buy a house, you're complying with state law. But as I said on a couple of slides ago, if you're renting, that is local law that governs your rent. Business contracts, for example, in our case, our instructors are on contract, they are not employees, workers' compensation, and so forth. So in New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo is in charge, and he works with the state Senate and Assembly, which are called together the New York State Legislature. And Betsy, you're grinning, so you must have a question.
Actually, I don't have a question. Kitty said hi to me, and I was just happy about that.
All right, girls. Now, you know, no passing notes
Stop
during
passing notes, teacher.
Okay. All right. National or federal law? Yes, I know. She's not a big fan of Donald Trump. So what is the federal government responsible for? Very important, declaring war and sending the military overseas. The federal government makes immigration policy, and so some of our students have been asking about that because they have friends or family members who got caught when the shutdown occurred, the immigration shutdowns have occurred, and the president does that by executive order. So immigration policy is federal or national. Bankruptcy law, Social Security Administration, anti-discrimination and civil rights laws, which of course have been very much in the news lately because of the protests. Those laws are national laws. Patent and copyright laws, so if you invent something in the United States, you can file for a patent or a copyright through your lawyer, and then you get to own it for some period of time, sometimes forever. And in the United States, someone can't steal that idea or invention from you without violating the law. Tax fraud and making fake money, also in the news lately. I thought making fake money was a little bit easier to understand than the term counterfeiting. So that's why I didn't use counterfeiting. So who's in charge of the federal government? President Donald Trump, of course, and he works with, hopefully, the US Congress, which is made up of the Senate and House of Representatives. Again, these are all elected officials, elected by the people. So I mentioned earlier that the Constitution is the important document that that everything flows from in the United States. So the Constitution of the United States calls for what are referred to as 3 branches of government. We already just mentioned the legislative branch, which is Congress, made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and the legislature, Congress, makes laws. Only the legislature can make laws in the United States at the federal level. The executive branch, which is made up of the president and the vice president and what are called secretaries of various agencies. So for example, the US Department of Education, the US Department of Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services. There are in total 15 of those agencies, and the directors or secretaries of those agencies are appointed by the president. They are not elected, unlike Congress. And then the judicial branch, or the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court makes all of its decisions based on the Constitution, their interpretation of the Constitution. The Supreme Court of the United States, which you may have heard of, is the final say on legal matters in the US. So if something happens locally in a court and it involves a constitutional issue, it can be brought all the way to the Supreme Court for a final ruling. But once the Supreme Court rules on that issue, that's it. There's nowhere else to go. And so the judicial branch or the Supreme Court keeps an eye on the executive branch or the White House and the secretaries to make sure that they are complying with the Constitution. And sometimes laws that the Congress make end up before the Supreme Court for interpretation.
Marcia, the chat has taken a political turn.
Okay.
Pat Rajala says the president could use that slide. And Kathy discusses how he did not receive the popular vote and a little more. So this is very entertaining. We're all enjoying this.
All right, Rajala. Yes, we can send him my PowerPoint when we're done here, if you think that would help. All right. So this is basically what I just showed you in picture form, but in words. So again, the legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch implements the laws through the president and the cabinet, and the judicial has the final say on all legal questions. Okay, coronavirus. So we've had a lot of things happening in a lot of places, lots of laws and rules and things coming down. And so our students were asking, like, who is making all these rules and regulations about what we have to do, how, wearing masks and staying at home and so forth. So we tried to pull some of those threads a little bit to see if we could help them to understand which level of government really has a say in what part of this. So the coronavirus stay-at-home orders, the president and his advisors, who are mostly, but not entirely, medical people, made or recommended guidelines for staying at home. The state governors decided what they were going to implement within the state. So the rules that we ended up abiding by were determined by the state. And then they were influenced by city and county leaders. So as we've been reopening in New York State, you are all probably aware that the counties didn't all reopen at the same time. And that is because downstate in Nassau, Westchester, Suffolk, all of you downstate, the coronavirus was far worse and had infected far more people than it did in some of our upstate regions. Here in Onondaga, we had a pretty severe impact, but there were parts of the state that were not impacted very much at all as a percentage of population. So the county leaders had some say in working with the governor on which county or which region opened up when. And I think as of now, everything has been reopened all the way across in the state. Curfews. When the racial protesting began a few weeks ago, there was rioting here in the city of Syracuse. And so the mayor decided to impose a curfew from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and the county executive decided to impose that curfew across the whole county. And the reason was that they felt that if they only had a curfew in the city of Syracuse, then the rioters would move into the immediate surrounding towns and villages and create destruction there. So they made it countywide. You may know that Onondaga County is a pretty big county, but a lot of it, quite a lot of it is suburban and then rural. And then outside of that, it becomes even more rural in the surrounding counties. So that curfew was imposed initially for 30 days, but over that first weekend, by Sunday night, things had quieted down quite a bit. So they lifted the curfew after 24 hours, and it has not had to be imposed again because the protests have been by far and away very peaceful here. So, and in fact, the protesters are still marching. I believe that they have stated that they are going to march every day for 30 days. And they march through downtown Syracuse. There have been small protests and rallies in some of the surrounding towns and villages. And then, as I mentioned earlier, immigration is controlled at the federal level. So when the virus first started to spread, there were travel bans imposed in and out of the United States by executive order. And some of our students may have been affected by family members or friends who could not get back to the United States from places where they had traveled. So these were some specific questions that students had asked their teachers. And I'm smiling because, of course, the first one is, it pertains to Pat's comment about how perhaps the president could benefit from this presentation. Can the president order the US military into the 50 states? And the answer is no, he can't. He has to be invited in by the governor to do that. For the military to march on Syracuse, the governor of New York State would have to ask him. So, however, as I said earlier at the beginning of the presentation, political speech is protected in the United States by the US Constitution. So what that means is that the president can say, I am going to send the army into Syracuse, even though he can't legally do that. He can say it because free speech is protected in the United States. It isn't free, accurate speech, it's just free speech. So, but the answer is no. And then one of our students very astutely, who I believe is from Iraq, very astutely asked, what about Washington, D.C.? Wasn't there military police in Washington, D.C.? And of course, yes, he did invite the military into Washington, D.C. because, and it surprised some of our students, I think, to learn that Washington is the capital of the United States, but it has never become a state itself. And there have been many attempts over the years on the part of local officials to petition the government to make it a state, but it is not a state. So the president was within his legal rights to ask the military to come into Washington, D.C. to restore order. But he cannot do that here or in your community unless Governor Cuomo asks him to. And the next question was, what is the difference between the National Guard and the US military? So the National Guard is made up of part-time people who are inactive most of the time on reserve, unless the state governor or the president activates them during an emergency. The military, on the other side of this, is always on active duty, and its job is to protect and defend the US against outside threats. So we tried to make the point to our students that the National Guard is often called up to help people during an emergency. So I know that in Westchester, or where the locus of the coronavirus outbreak was, and Pat, I'm forgetting the name of the town. But in any event, the National Guard was called out to help with that.
New Rochelle.
Thank you, New Rochelle, thank you, total blank. So the National Guard was called out to help. After hurricanes, you will often see the National Guard rescuing people, delivering food, rebuilding bridges, that kind of thing. Here in Syracuse, the Salvation Army does a big food and toy giveaway every Christmas. And big, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people are served, and the National Guard comes in and sorts all the donated food into bins and into bags for the giveaway. So they're ordinary people. You may know some people in the National Guard and not even know that they are members of the Guard. And finally, can ICE deport undocumented immigrants in Syracuse? As I mentioned earlier, we are a sanctuary city. Local police, what that means, if you hear that term, is that police do not participate in deporting undocumented immigrants. That's what it means to be a sanctuary city. But ICE can still deport someone if they are undocumented and it comes to the attention of ICE. They do not have authority over refugees and legal immigrants. And that was a point of confusion for our students because you hear about ICE all the time deporting people, and they were worried about that. And our local ICE office is located downtown in an old department store. There's not a big sign on the outside of the building that says Home of ICE. So it seemed important to let them know where the office is actually located. Oops. There we go. I think I accidentally went all the way to the end. So then at this point, we asked if there were questions about any of that. And there were some interesting questions. One of them had to do with, a little more discussion around ICE. They wanted to know if we knew when the immigration office was reopening locally, and we were able to get that information while we were actually on the Zoom with them. Our local office has reopened and you can make appointments. They asked about when citizenship tests were going to resume, and we were able to give them that information and so on. So that is the basics. I'm looking at the chat. It has taken a political turn. I believe that the travel bans from China and Italy were lifted, and then there was, due to the coronavirus, calming down, but for the week before about reimposing them. And I don't think that happened. So I think the coronavirus travel bans have been listed. But Kathy is saying, like, there are still some travel restrictions, and she's got a website. That's great. And somebody has a student who came from China. So yeah, so it's changing, day by day. But the important thing that we wanted to give the students some understanding of is where some of these policies are made and where they come from, so that it's not quite so confusing. About who does what where. That was kind of our real purpose. And I thought I had included information about the Electoral College, but I did find online, it may be in the notes, which you didn't get to see today, but I did find online a pretty simple explanation about the Electoral College that you could share with them if you need to. So that's it. Any other questions? Thoughts?
Marcia, unrelated to your talk, Kathy had a comment. The first comment in the chat was that she has heard one program has received their contract.
I saw that. Kathy, do you know, did they get the full amount of their award?
Yes. Yeah, as far as I know, it was written as promised.
That's good news.
It is.
It's very good.
I was my comments, I like how programs can take these slides and customize them. And it could be presented either via distance, if we're still, presenting via distance, or once we get back to face, just with a few updates, it'd be something standard that you could present, into a group. So I like how you did it as kind of the training of trainers approach. You taught us by treating us as students so that we can see how it will work in our agencies. So thank you.
Kathy, I follow the rules as often as I can. So I know that's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, and it's, it didn't even take us a full hour, but I think our experience with our students was there were a lot of questions. And so I think we were on Zoom with them for just about a full hour, but there's enough material for about 40 minutes, which is really good for an hour-long class, right? You could do it in a class. If you do it the way we did it, it counts toward your case management because it's providing information that is, that they need. So we counted it as a case management session. So, okay, the US-Canadian border is not open, okay. And good. Well, any questions or further thoughts? And if not, we'll let you go and go face the day. Sally, you're muted, so unmute yourself.
Oh, I just wanted to thank you so much. I think that I would use this with every one of my classes because I find that many American citizens don't know this information. And it's really almost tragic that they've gone through school and they don't understand how even their local government works. So I think this is really an opportunity to help our students, especially the ones that are becoming citizens, or even if they're not, they'll understand how America works.
Right, and as I said, I tutor a student. I've been working with her for several years, and she likes to talk. We do a lot of reading about current events, which usually involve some level of government. And she was totally confused and still is a little confused about these levels of government. So it's a good refresher. Even if you did go to school in the United States, you maybe didn't learn this material in an interesting way and didn't retain it, and then again, I can't emphasize enough that the issue of political free speech confuses things because people can and do say things that are not actually legally correct. And so I think that adds to the confusion. But thank you, Sally. I'm glad you found it useful. Jocelyn?
Yes, good morning. My only issue would be with my English language learners. I would have to tailor the language and make sure that I was translating or simplifying to a certain extent. I mean, they know a whole lot, but I think that the language would have to be tailored. But definitely for the basic learners, I would use that
So
in a
it's
New York
interesting.
minute.
It's interesting because we had all ELLs on the Zoom. They were all ELLs, and they were, so we all of our students are below the 6th grade. Roughly, they're almost all levels 1 and 2. We have no HSE program at LiteracyCNY, so we didn't do any HSE prep. So they're all reading English below that level, and they followed along, and I tried to simplify as much as I could, but absolutely, if you find that you can think of a simpler way to say some of what I said, have at it. I didn't patent the PowerPoint, so you can do whatever you want with it.
It's not necessarily simplifying, it's checking to make sure that they understand what they're reading.
Right.
And in that respect, because I have different levels and they come in and out.
Right.
And so as long as I double check to make sure that they understand what the sentences mean, then we're fine.
And actually, you could interject slides with some quizzes to recap the learning. You could do that. I didn't, but you could do something like that with it too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Marcia?
Anybody else? Yeah.
There's a comment, the verbal script was helpful to accompany the slides. Is that available? And I'll tell everybody, Marcia just knows this stuff, but I think you do have notes with the slides, right?
Yes. Yes, and I think Kathy is recording this too. So if you wanted to go back and make your own notes, you know, based on some of what I said, you can feel free to do that too.
Is this being recorded in the cloud or on the computer?
I'm going to defer to Betsy and Kathy. I don't know.
So this is being recorded on the cloud right now. I don't know if you are also recording, Kathy.
No, the cloud is the best choice, I think. So we'll have a link that we can send to everyone along with the slides. Yeah, I saw that Betsy was recording it when I got on, so we're in good shape with that.
The only thing is you need to zip ahead a little because of all the introductions.
Yeah.
It's about 10 or 15 minutes before we get to the meat.
And I did have, for some of the slides where there was a lot of information, I did have notes on those slides. We just weren't looking at them today. All right.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, will all the comments that we've been making be on that recording?
I think so.
Is the question in the, are you talking about comments in the chat or are you talking about?
Yes, and verbal, not only, yes, we responded to comments.
Okay, so the chat we don't usually make available, and I'd have to look into that. But the comments, you know, this is a audio visual recording, so anything that's been said would be part of the recording.
So there's a suggestion to give a copy of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to every student you have. That's a great idea, and they are available online. Of course, the original Constitution was written in the English of the day, which is a little more formalistic than the way we speak today. So you would want to, you know, not to base everything on a data point of one, but I did read the Bill of Rights with my student who is now reading at about, I would say, comfortably at an 8th grade level, and she really struggled with the formal language. So you might want to take that into consideration. But there's probably out there are probably simplified versions that you can find as well.
There probably are some plain language. We can do a little looking for that, for some plain language. Mm-hmm.
Great. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all. It's great to see you. Have a great day. Go forth and remember that everything you hear is not necessarily factually based. That was a message I left my students with. Don't believe everything you hear, and feel free to ask us if you have a question. All right.
Thank
Take
you,
care,
Marcia.
everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Great to
Bye.
see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Marie.